I'm Teisha Bader. Thank you for joining us for this special program. This season on JBS, we are so thrilled to be broadcasting Srugim, the award-winning and beloved Israeli television series which explores the lives of young singles navigating life and love in the modern Orthodox world in Jerusalem. Some of you may be familiar with Srugim already. Like other hit series from Israel, such as Fauda or Shtisel, Srugim has been a popular TV import to the U.S. over the years. But we are especially excited to be bringing you season 1 of this series now, and we hope you'll enjoy spending time with Yifat, Hodaya, Reut, Amir, and Nati again, or meeting them for the very first time on JBS. Now, Srugim, the word in Hebrew, means knitted or crocheted. It refers to the crocheted yarmulkes, kippot, worn by modern Orthodox men on the show and in the community. Well, on this program, we are going to unravel Srugim, so to speak, looking closer at themes of Jewish life, identity, and of course, and most of all, Jewish dating. Like, how do young singles today experience dating in the modern Orthodox world? What are the specific challenges or benefits to being part of a religious community while trying to find a mate? During this program, we're going to look beyond the television series to the real world today to explore how these things play out, not just in Israel, but here in the U.S. And to help in that discussion, I'm thrilled to welcome into the JBS studio Shira Kaplan. Shira works on the morning talk show Live with Kelly and Ryan. She is also a Hebrew school teacher, a Jewish community organizer, and a podcast creator. And she is an Upper West Sider, a community some have drawn parallels with the Jerusalem neighborhood where Srugim takes place. And she has her own experience in the young professional modern Orthodox dating world. Welcome, Shira.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
So when you hear that people have made comparisons between the neighborhood in Jerusalem, which is Katamon, and lovingly referred to as Habitza, which means in English the swamp, which maybe has negative connotations, but we can get to that. Does that ring true for you, that comparison to the Upper West Side at all, and how and why?
Definitely. Just a large congregation of Jewish people together, young Jews, particularly in the age group where they are looking for a partner, definitely is parallel with Katamon and the Upper West Side. The Upper West Side in general is such an interesting sociological experiment, I feel like. There's something like 60,000 Jews between 60th and 100th Street, just on the Upper West Side. It's not just young people, but Jews in general. And I don't know that anyone's calling it Habitza, but there are other things that people call the Upper West Side, like the shtetl, for obvious reasons. People call going to Kiddush after shul a little bit like the meat market. And then there are a few buildings that are called the dorms, because they kind of serve as this transitional space between the college utopia of the Jewish community and your adult Jewish community.
That's so interesting. When you were watching the show, I know you're a fan of Srugim, there are situations, for example, in the first episode, I believe, where there's a young man who is in need of tefillin in the morning. He wants to say his prayers. He's at one of the girls' homes and asks her to get him some, and she brings tefillin, which are the black leather boxes that Jews use to pray, Jewish men basically, but she brings him a set of tefillin from a female neighbor who uses them. And he is completely in shock over this. He says, I'm not using these. They belong to a woman. It almost as if to say, I'd almost rather not pray than pray with these tefillin, which belong to a woman. Are there situations that you've encountered as far as women's roles in modern Orthodox Judaism that sort of are similar to that situation?
Yeah, the Upper West Side is very, very liberal in comparison to other Orthodox communities. There's still always work to be done in regard to front-facing women leadership roles. But there are a number of shuls on the Upper West Side, a number of synagogues. One of them, for example, is a partnership minyan, so there's a mechitza between the men and women seating, but women give divrei Torah, they read from the Torah, they lead davening. There are other more middle-of-the-road places, some places that you dress a little more formally. And on a date, when someone asks you what shul you go to, they're kind of feeling out maybe your political leanings, but also how religious are you? Because even though it's not a blanket statement, not everyone is exactly the same at every shul, it does give you kind of an implication of who someone is.
So relating to what you just said, someone asks you what shul you go to, it's getting information about you, right? So when you go on a dating site or what have you, you want information about the other person, obviously. You want to see if you'd be compatible. Is it helpful, like, to have more information? In other words, right off the bat, you can tell usually if a man is a modern Orthodox Jew by the knitted kippah. And sometimes, you know, you can say that many young Orthodox, modern Orthodox women dress in a similar fashion. I don't want a blanket statement saying dress the same, because that's really not true. But is it easier in a way to live in a neighborhood or in a community where certain things are identifiable right off the bat and you already have information? Or do you find that it limits or makes you judge people in a certain way?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think about specifically with kippot that it feels like it's like your sorority letters. Like this is the group that I am a part of. And I feel like like the kippah sruga, the knitted kippah, maybe it means you're a little more Zionistic, maybe you spend a little extra time in Israel. If you have like the more structured, like saucer kippah, it's a little more trendy. Maybe you're from, I don't know, an urban area. Then there's like this suede kippah that's kind of somewhere in the middle. And it's not always whatever, it's not like this is the person, who the person is, but it does give you kind of an idea. With women, it's a little more complicated because there is such a wide range of how people dress. And it's so incredibly personal, all of it. But I was even surprised seeing just the wide range that there is. And it doesn't define who you are as a Jew, but it does kind of put you somewhere. And like our brains, we need places to categorize people. And so to a degree, it helps.
Do you feel it's too insular sometimes? Or what are the pros and cons of being in a community? And obviously not the entire Upper West Side is Jewish, but like you mentioned, it's a very strong number, a very large population. Is there any negative to that insularity?
I think it's mostly positive. I would say, just to begin with the negatives, I think people feel like it's oversaturated. There's a huge amount of people, and yet at the same time, you also feel like you're seeing the same people everywhere. So somehow we hold both. I think overall it's a really amazing thing because, again, it's this transitional space, this in-between before you go off into your adult life, you know, to be married, etc. And you're physically so close to all the people that you share so many things in common with. The modern Orthodox ritual of Shabbat, of shul, and then Shabbat dinner, and then Shabbat morning services, and then Shabbat lunch. We have this like amazing, traditional, meaningful thing to gather around, and it automatically cuts out the usage of phones, which is something that people have such critical feelings about. But it's amazing. We actually actively don't use phones from this time that we're doing the most social activity of our whole week, which I personally really love. And I think that it's hard for people of other denominations, maybe in other groups, other parts of the country, to find that community in the same way that exists on the Upper West Side. So I personally, I'm a fan. I completely understand why people would feel differently, but overall I think it's a net positive.
For sure. And talk about the Shabbat dinners that you host on occasion. I know you work with a group called Maisha House. Tell us a little bit more about that and how it sort of feeds into the social aspect.
Yeah, so that was, when I first moved to the Upper West Side, that was my social life, was Shabbat. And I think for a lot of people it is. You have a crazy work week, people are tired after work, they don't want to do social things, and the weekend is the time when you're all off, and it also happens to be the time when you're observing Shabbat. And the biggest thing for me was to figure out a way that I could host as many meals as possible. It's just an amazing way to have really meaningful interactions with people. And there's art, you're gathering around something already. There's no like need to, you don't have to make conversation, you don't have to make things to talk about. It's like, we're all doing the same thing. It's been really, really special for me. I try to engage people who are affiliated with Orthodoxy and also people who aren't, and just kind of because I do think there should be more interdenominational interactions. But overall, it's been an amazing thing for me. I do get funding from a few different organizations for, depending on the week, and it's made a huge difference in my social life and also my ability to make the community that I was hoping to have, in addition to being a part of other people's Shabbat meals and Shabbat experience.
I love what you said just there about integrating it more with different denominations of Judaism. People, You know, I was explaining this the other day to somebody who didn't know a lot about Judaism, about the various denominations, and there are so many. I mean, even within modern Orthodoxy or within conservative Judaism or Reform, there is a spectrum. And Shabbat, like you said, can be such a positive thing. And whether the person drives to your house or walks there, the fact that they're all sitting together at the table, I think, is really like such a beautiful thing. Are there conversations when you've had people that are even perhaps secular or not as religious? Are there conversations about that, or is that kind of not the topic that is brought up?
Yeah, I mean, if there's conversations about how we're all different, I guess to a degree, yes. But the thing that I'm always so careful about is, for example, with the ritual of washing hands after saying Kiddush and before saying Hamotzi, doing the blessing over the bread, I don't want to be like that annoying over-explainer, but I do want people to feel as comfortable as possible. I do not believe there's any such thing as a bad Jew. We just all have different ways of practicing, and perhaps we haven't been shown Judaism in a meaningful way that strikes us as something that we should be doing. So I probably am guilty of being an over-explainer, but I'm very into, I don't call them icebreakers because I don't believe in icebreakers. The ice has been broken. We are people wanting to gather. I call them introductions. I always have some sort of like silly question or introspective question that everyone should answer. And also, even if you know most of the people, if it's a reflection about your week, we wouldn't have gotten to that subject if you wouldn't have been point blank asked about it. So I try to provide as much guidance, but also let it be what it's supposed to be.
What's a sample question you ask people at the table?
Okay, so this is, what was the one I did last week? Oh, okay. I was thinking a lot about highbrow versus lowbrow content. And so the question was, is there something that you really, really, really love? You do not consider it a guilty pleasure. It's considered lowbrow, but you think it should be highbrow.
Like a television show or something to watch?
Yeah. Like my answer was TikTok because everyone so detests TikTok. But I found so many recipes. I found so much home decor. Like I think it should be given more respect. But
well, thank you, Shira, so much for that insight. And we are so excited right now to welcome into the studio and speak more about Srugim with the creator of the series, Eliezer Laizy Shapiro. Born in Israel to American parents who made Aliyah, Laizy studied in yeshiva and served in the IDF as a paratrooper before going on to study filmmaking at the Ma'aleh Film School in Jerusalem. He created and directed Srugim, which was named Best Drama by the Israeli Film and Television Academy. And he joins us now from Jerusalem. Welcome, Laizy. Thank you so much for coming on JBS.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure for me.
Thank you. So, how did this idea come to you? What's the seed of Srugim?
The seed of Srugim is my life, of course. At that time, we started working on the show around 15 years ago. I was single. I was in my late 30s. I was living in Jerusalem. And I looked around me and I said, here's a whole world that no one's really familiar with. And I had graduated from film school a couple of years before. I had done a documentary film for one of the cable channels here. And I was also looking for good ideas. And so I was also trying to make a living and also create. So it all came together, my life and my yearning to create and to start my career. And we came up with this idea. And it worked.
I mean, people always say, write what you know, right?
Definitely. And it wasn't just me. We put together a writer's room. First of all, I have a co-creator called Chava Divan, which we are both the creators of the show. I'm the director, but we are both the creators together. And we put together a writing room of like 5 or 6 writers, depends when, and almost all of them had experience being single in Jerusalem at a certain time. So everyone was writing from their own personal experience.
Now, this is the first time that this world, this community, was seen on primetime television, the modern Orthodox single dating world. It's kind of a huge responsibility to have, in a way, to want to give as authentic a picture as possible of this community. Did that feel heavy at the time, or were we just trying to write a good show and then the rest will follow?
No, it felt heavy.
Yeah.
I can tell you, because both me and Chava we're really good kids. We're not rebels or anything like that. And we knew that there's a lot of responsibility, especially because in Israel, our society never really got good PR. It was never showed authentically on TV. If it was showed usually in a political context, usually created by people who had negative agendas about it. And, we knew that our people are looking at us and like, you're bringing us to TV. We want to look good. So we're not a PR company. We don't, write things to make people look good. We wanted to tell our stories. And I think in the bottom line, when you tell a real story, a human story, and you create characters that people love and identify with, then you don't have to show you're living in a perfect world. I mean, if you create these characters that people like and identify, then you did the job. You don't have to make everything look pretty. Actually, when you show the problems, when you show the flaws, people identify with you more.
I love that so much, and I love the fact that the themes really and the way we feel watching Srugim, it is a universal thing. It's not that you have to be a member of the modern Orthodox community to enjoy the show. You have to be a person to enjoy the show because you're looking into these people's lives. And as you said, them dealing with the day-to-day, many of the same challenges we all deal with, perhaps with slightly different things around it in a different kind of framework, but it's very similar to it's human connection. What was the response when the show was first on the air? I'm sure you heard a lot from the community. I'm wondering what people said and how they felt sort of being portrayed suddenly on the big screen or small screen.
Okay, so it divides into different audiences, of course. Here in Israel, the secular audience, where people who are not religious at all, were fascinated. It's the first time they saw religious people on TV and they were human beings. They weren't just, a stereotype or something like that. Most of them really loved the show and I got good feedback. When it comes to my own society, it was, of course, more complex. And it, divides again between our society itself became so diverse over the last decade or the last 20 years. You have, our more liberal sides and more conservative sides. So, of course, the more conservative sides were like, what are you doing? You're doing, Achilul Hashem, what they say. You're showing our problems. You're showing, things between men and women that you shouldn't show. And you should be ashamed of yourself. And you're not religious and stuff like that. And on the other side, where people are like, this is great. We finally could see ourselves on TV. We finally, people could really get us. They know what we're about. People always came to me like, people who work with non-religious people, they'd say, in the show, if it was showed, let's say Monday night, Tuesday night, everyone in the office would say, is that the way it really is? Is that the way your life is? So it was real eye opener for a lot of people. And I think most of the people in my society, the mainstream, they enjoyed it, they appreciated it, and they were proud of it. It was really crazy years. We got a lot of responses, but most of them were very, very positive.
That's awesome. I want to turn things over to Shira for a minute, who can sort of ask you something in relation to where she lives in New York. And go ahead, Shira.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about the comparisons of Katamon, the singles community, to the singles or couples community of the Upper West Side of New York.
Well, I've been there several times. I was actually, when the second season came out, I was invited by a synagogue in the Upper West Side, the Jewish Center on 86th Street, to do a premiere of the second season. Like a shul, flew me in. It was like a special event. It was packed with hundreds of people. It was very exciting, and I got to know the Upper West Side. It's of course very similar. I think it's a little bit more advanced. It's like 20 years ahead of us always, because it existed, I think, already in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that it's like us, but like 20 years from now. And I must tell you that over the last 10 years, the idea of trying to make an American version in the Upper Side, it's gone across us many times. We even wrote a pilot once, and I could tell you, I don't want to give too many details, but there is more of a serious negotiation even now with a certain company, and we're talking the details already. They're interested in it. They think that it's something that would sell. Especially these days, TV has become much more, Americans are willing to see different kind of cultures and stuff like that. You don't all have to be like the same thing. And it might actually happen. I don't want to open my mouth and give too many details, but it might actually happen eventually.
It has to. It has to, Laizy, okay? We want to see this show. It's such a perfect fit. I don't know why it's taken this long, but okay. And as you said, Israeli TV is just booming right now. I mean, so many, not only are we seeing shows like Shtisel and Fauda, but also shows like Your Honor, based on Israeli shows. Homeland, of course, based on an Israeli show. So get this done, please. Just let us know when it's finished.
I think it would be great.
I do too.
It would be like our show, but like with more chic, designer outfits and stuff like that.
Exactly. You mentioned men and women relationships on the show. I just want to thank you for showing such strong, complex, interesting women on this show because, especially in the modern Orthodox world, there are assumptions of women's role and women's place. And from the get-go, from the first episode, these are women who are going to say Kiddush at their table. They're going to say Hamotzi at their table. They are, you know, they have very strong views on things. They're very much masters of their own destiny, kind of. And I just think that's a wonderful thing to see again. And a lot of things we see on the show I feel like we see it from the female perspective. And well, thank you for that, first of all, because that's not a given. And this show is not written today when that is like a huge emphasis. This was written years ago when it was not as hip and cool, perhaps, to really show the female perspective. So talk a bit about that.
It's very funny. It's not exactly what we planned, but somehow it evolved to be that the women were like the main thing. You know, it's really about these three girls. The men have their stories. They're interesting, of course, but somehow the women are more complex. I don't know what to say about that. Maybe there's something universal about that. We found it telling their first of all, we were many of us, some of us were women writers, so maybe they you know, they knew how to write it better. I think the majority were women, but I really found that it was somehow better to tell the story through them. They were more complex. There's something about men in general, as you know, sometimes less complex. And through three different kind of women, we showed three different models of being a modern Orthodox woman. One was more conservative, more old-fashioned. One was very advanced, you know, also feminist about being religion and also being religious, and also she had a very strong career. And one was more of a rebel, you know, was, you know, between the border of being religious and not religious. But still, as you said, she was, you know, the master of her, you know, she was taking in charge of what's going to be with her, of her destiny. It somehow worked out like that. I can't tell you exactly why. That's how it worked out.
Well, it's really appreciated and so well done. When you look now at that specific neighborhood, let's say of Katamon, I don't know if people still call it Habitza, the swamp, and are there changes that have happened that you've observed in that community since the show came out?
Definitely. First of all, I feel like an old man already, you know, but I got married 12 years ago, and I went into my, you know, married, suburban life, but I'm still in Jerusalem, of course, and you go into a different phase of raising kids and so on. I still follow what's going on. It's changed very much. Like the certain like hip synagogues that were 10 years ago are totally shifted to different places. People are less innocent, I feel. Also, the neighborhoods have become different. Like Katamon is still popular, but like Nachlaot became more popular, maybe for younger people, for more hip people. And more interesting thing that happened over the last 10 years, Tel Aviv has become a scene. When I was writing the show 15 years ago, there were hardly any religious people living in Tel Aviv, young, you know, Orthodox single people. And now there's a huge scene there. I have nephews in their 30s living there, and it's very different than here in Jerusalem. It has its, you know, Tel Aviv. It's different in Tel Aviv in any case. And I think there's a lot less innocence because the world has changed also, you know, all the, you know, we didn't have smartphones, you know, you arrange a Shabbat meal now through the WhatsApp, through a WhatsApp group, people date through WhatsApps, you know, they dump people through WhatsApps or whatever. World has changed, and so has our world, but something basic is still there, you know, the loneliness, the pressure from your family, that's always there, but it's different.
I think you need to write a Tel Aviv version, first of all, of Srugim.
I'm also thinking of that, by the way.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay. We have high expectations from you, and Shira
Yeah.
and I are waiting for all of this to come out, as is most of our audience is. I want to ask you something. I read about the film school you have in your bio. The film school you went to sort of pushed this idea of exploring, I'll read, burning issues of Jewish and Israeli identity fearlessly yet artistically explored on screen, which is clearly something you did. Did that really sort of inform you as well in creating the show? And, you know, we have Shtisel, many people don't know, came after. Srugim was first, but is another example of like, okay, let's really look at something. Let's give people this peek into this world, as you said.
Yeah, just one thing about Shtisel, by the way, the creator of Shtisel, one of the creators, Ori Elon, he was one of our writers in the second and third season. Then he went on and created his own show. He's very, very talented.
Wow.
I think in Male, I started learning there 25 years ago, and I also teach there, by the way. There was always really some kind of pioneering there. Like they created a film school for religious people for several reasons, also to make it more comfortable. There's no productions on Shabbat, and it's easier to work with religious people. Some of the content of the stuff you learn also, but the main idea was try to create some kind of, connection between the Jewish world and the film world. And that's that's very high expectations. I think in the bottom line, they created something very strong, more in the social area or the cultural area, that it's the first time that young religious people are making movies about their life and showing their dilemmas. And that made a huge impact on the shows coming out. You see religious people and they're human beings. Okay, that's like Srugim. It's not my agenda, but it's always there. I like telling stories. I was born like that. I like making people laugh, making them cry, making them think about things. But I also had a chance here. I did have sort of a subconscious agenda to show my world and show people that we're normal. Okay, because a lot of times we get bad PR.
I think that's huge, and I do think it's had that positive impact. So congratulations, Mazal Tov, on the show, on it still being popular this many years later. We're so excited to be showing it on JBS. And okay, so you're going to be working on the Upper West Side version of Srugim, the Tel Aviv version of Srugim. Anything else you're working on that we should know about before we let you go?
There's a kids version of Srugim.
Really?
Over the last year, I created a TV show for the educational TV here in Israel, which it's based on religious kids. They were specifically wanted to make a show about religious kids because they're not represented on TV almost at all. And we created a show. I'm not going to direct it, but I'm the creator of the show. And it's going to be, Amir Tashem is going to be filmed this summer. So I'll know more about it. We'll tell more about it next year.
Amazing, Laizy. Thank you so much for joining us, Shira and I. We appreciate and we cannot wait to see what you do next. We wait with great anticipation.
Thank you. You're welcome. It was great. It was great being here.
Thank you. Thank you to Laizy Shapiro, to Shira Kaplan. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. It was wonderful.
It was wonderful. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching JBS.